Welcome to the Fierce and Fit Mentor Podcast. I'm your host, Clarice Yao, a holistic health coach dedicated to helping women over 40 achieve their fittest, fiercest selves. Each week, we'll dive deep into the unique challenges of menopause, including belly fat, weight gain, muscle building, hormonal imbalances, and more. These episodes are recorded live from my free Facebook group, Fierce Women Sculpting Powerful Bodies and Champion Mindsets. Be sure to check the link in the show notes to join our incredible community and access free content, challenges, and resources designed just for you. Hi, everyone. Let me know if you see me. Awesome. Okay, so this is the top 10 strategies to a flatter stomach. Okay, so this is a hot topic, and I know everybody, more than 80% of you want to know how to flatten the stomach, whether you have a big belly or even a little bit extra pooch. You are looking for that nice bikini body all the time so that when you go step on the beach, you feel ready. So let's actually dive into a little bit first of the introduction. So again, this is the Fierce Women community where we sculpt powerful bodies and champion mindsets. I am also going to say hi to 180 countries because we now stream onto podcasts into 180 countries. So if you're listening to me around the world, hello, ni hao, bonjour, I'll say hi in all sorts of language to you, okay? So if you are not subscribed to my podcast series, which is called the Fierce and Fit Mentor Podcast, I strongly encourage you to do so. It is on Spotify, Apple, Google Music, YouTube, all over the place right now, because I do release things that I actually don't necessarily have live right now. So tomorrow we're releasing an episode, one of my episodes, one of the best episodes from last year on DNA expression. So for some of you who remember that one, it's going to be live on the podcast tomorrow. So with everybody on here, let's actually get started and let's talk about the top 10 strategies. So we're gonna dive into, if you know me, I like science a lot. I like evidence. I like case studies. I like reading research papers. I like all the stuff that is like the background of it. Because I was the kid that was like, always, why? Why does this happen? Why? Why? Tell me why. My parents would be like, stop asking why. But this is now why I probably am a better coach or teacher, because I like to learn everything at a minuscule level. Everything I learn, I like to be like super detailed. All right, so number one is you need to understand the fat cell biology and understand the different kinds of fat cells there are, okay? So if you've followed me for a while, you'll know that there is white fat cells and brown fat cells, okay? So there's different functions to your fat cells. Now, the type of fat cells that you typically don't want too much are white fat cells. What is the function of white fat cells? So white fat cells, it primarily is to store energy, right? And, it helps you reserve energy and contain it. But in small amounts is okay, but in large amounts, it will lead to excess weight gain and metabolic issues. So when you have excess white fat cells, it will accumulate in your abdominal, in your thighs, in your arms, and it will store excess calories around your body. And it leads to inflammatory markers, cytokines. I will talk more specifically 4 or 5 types of cytokines later, contributing to your insulin resistance and metabolic slowdown. And the most dangerous kind is the one that sits here. This is why you want that flat stomach for your body, right? So you really want less white fat cells if you can. Of course, a small amount, like tiny bit for your woman hormones is good. I'm not saying like none, but you don't want to accumulate too much, okay? Now, how do you reduce white fat cells? First of all, you need to increase calorie expenditure through strength training and HIIT workouts. Now, if you follow me for a while, I talk a lot about MTP, which is menopausal training protocol. And as I go through these 10 strategies, you're going to hear different things come up about training. And it can get kind of confusing because they'll talk about you need this, and you need this, and you need this type of training and this type of training. And that's kind of why I developed MTP, because I believe the way you train is really important. It's not just strength training to just strength train. You also need like HIIT. You also need like endurance. You also need like different forms of training in order to maximize your caloric burn But of course, any exercise is better than none, right? We know this. So the first thing is to make sure you are exercising and having the right training protocols. Now, second way to reduce white fat cells is to regulate insulin levels, okay? So you regulate insulin levels with controlling carbs and increasing fiber in your food. So controlling carbs means you need to understand there are different classes of carbs and how you eat those carbs matter in combination with each other, but also in like why you would insert different types of carbs, right? You have starch carbs, you have simple carbs, you have fibrous carbs. When do you use the carbs does matter, and it does matter whether you are insulin resistant or not, which will impact how much of those carbs or carb loading should you have, okay? So you need to regulate insulin levels through understanding the use of carbs, okay? And then of course the last point here to reduce, white fat cells is to reduce overall stress and cortisol in your system. Now coming back to fat cells, we talked white fat cells and then there's brown fat cells, okay? So brown fat cells are your good fat cells. We consider them the metabolic, the metabolic type of fat. They contain mitochondria. So they don't actually just store fat. They actually convert fat into heat, which is called thermogenesis. So it actually produces heat. It uses energy. This is the good type of fat. When you have more brown fat, it increases calorie burning even at rest. It improves insulin sensitivity and it helps regulate your body temperature. And actually they say when you shiver a lot, you will increase brown fat cells in your body. But there's a fun fact that babies actually have high amounts of brown fats compared to adults. And this is actually why you see babies are super cute and chubby and everything, but then they grow so fast and they expend so much energy, and then they grow they grow an inch or 2 inch, so quickly, because the brown fat is very active and it's producing a lot of energy. So we want more brown fat cells. So again, how do you activate more brown fat cells? So you might have heard me talk about this maybe a year ago, I think a year or a year and a half ago, when I spoke about cold exposure, cold therapy. You might have heard a lot of people doing cold baths, cold plunges. This is the reason. So when you do cold exposure, you actually help increase brown fat cells in your body. And so doing a little bit of that could potentially be good, although, not everyone's suitable for it if they have maybe blood pressure issues or high cortisol. But I would say if you're generally a healthy person, so in Puerto Escondido on the beach, they had cold plunges on the beach gym. So, they have people jumping into those cold things all the time. So that can help you increase your brown fat cells. Again, another way to increase brown fat cells, no surprise, is to increase strength training and your HIIT again. But like I said, the thing is to have strength training and HIIT, a high intensity interval training, but not spiking your cortisol. So being careful about that, because if you're not careful about spiking cortisol, then because if you do a lot of high intensity interval training without kind of balancing it, you can easily overspike your cortisol, which leads to more belly fat. Okay, so being careful about that. You want to eat lots of healthy foods, healthy omegas, things like salmon, avocado, things with a lot of good omegas, as well as a little bit of spicy food can help increase a little bit of the brown fat. And of course, being able to control your sleep and have good sleep activation. Now, I want to talk more about sleep in the next category with epigenetics, okay? But the first category here is white fat cells versus brown fat cells. And how many of you believe you have too much white fat cells and you need more brown fat cells? So it identifies for you, okay, one, I need to switch the amount of type of fat in my body, okay? So that's number one. Okay, number two, let's talk about epigenetics, okay? Epigenetics. So epigenetics is how DNA affects your fat storage. So like I said, tomorrow we're releasing a big one on my podcast. So again, if you're not on that podcast, make sure you put podcast below. It's going to go into more details of this DNA specifics that I'm going to talk about, okay? So what is epigenetics? Basically, epigenetics is how your gene is switched on and off by lifestyle choices like food, exercise, stress, okay? So what that means is tomorrow on that podcast, I talk about DNA methylation process, which means how does the methylation attachment process to your DNA helix actually happen that changes your gene expression? So you have a helix in your DNA, right? Hundreds of those in your like cellular structure. Those include your blueprint and your coding. So in the blueprint and coding, it will have different, like when things come into the cells, it will attach to different parts of that DNA helix. And that DNA helix is going to change its expression, turn switches on and off based on what you do. This is what I'm going to talk about now, but in greater detail on tomorrow's podcast, okay? So first of all is nutrigenomics is nutrition with gene expression, okay? Nutrition with gene expression. So there are certain foods that will turn on better fat burning genes in your body. And as indicated above, you'll see a common theme. If you have more things with potentially omega-3s, things with polyphenols and antioxidants, those will help regulate better fat burning in your body. So, polyphenols like berries, green tea, that type of stuff is really great to support better metabolism, as well as in ensuring you have a lot of high fiber in your food is really important, because high fiber not only, there's so many things with fiber. Fiber relates to you as a woman in menopause because it affects your estrogen hormone. Fiber connects with estrogen receptors within your gut system. So it's extremely important that you make sure you have lots of fiber, but actually fiber also turns on certain genes within your DNA. So this is why make sure your fiber should be, like I say to all my BioRevive ladies that are in that program, should be what number? What's the number? Fiber should be at least 28 grams or higher, maybe even up to 35 grams of fiber. Okay, so making sure you are getting that amount of fiber in your food. Okay, so that will help turn on some of the DNA for burning fat. What will turn off kind of that like good gene for metabolism and start to encourage storage in the DNA expression? So all of you know this, but again, I have to say it because people still eat sometimes crappy food, right? So if you are going to turn on fat storing genes is usually when you eat processed foods, things with trans fat that will slow your metabolism down. Anything with high sugar intake will increase your insulin resistance and belly fat accumulation. And of course, artificial sweeteners. Yes, you follow me for a long time. You know I don't like those. I don't care if it tells you it's erythritol. It doesn't it says like it's 0 sugar on the front label. If on the back it says it has artificial sweeteners or any kind, I'm usually not a fan of it. Now, this is a big hurdle for a lot of women because a lot of women are taking bars and like protein shakes, and I need to get my protein shake in at the gym. So I encourage you to make sure you are really conscious of what you're taking in and make sure those shakes don't have a lot of those things, because I know with the last 4 or 5 clients I intook since January, at the very beginning, Dana, you remember, I think it was you, I can't remember, another gal. It was like, I just looked at your shakes and I was like, oh, look at this, 7 inflammatory markers in that one shake, right? So being extremely careful, again, because again, there's so many reasons. Artificial sweeteners not only causes you to turn genetic coding into fat storage coding, but it disrupts your microbiome, which this is not a gut microbiome live, but if it disrupts your gut microbiome, then it further affects your belly fat accumulation and your nutrient absorption. So I have lots to say about like the types of things you put in your body and the chemicals you put in your body as well. So being very careful, because I actually see a lot of health foods having these so-called good sugars in them or alternative sugars, and you got to be super careful in regards to this, okay? So continue with epigenetics. So the second thing is, this is super cool, okay? Exercise will rewrite your genetic coding. Now, I'm going to share a case study with you in a few minutes here, so stay tuned. And make sure, by the way, please tag somebody you know on this live, because I think more people need to learn it. And like I say, if you tag people, more people see it, more people learn, you help more women around you. So tag someone you know on this, okay? Because there's a really cool case study I'm going to describe to you right away. So physical activity alters gene expression, and it will turn on fat burning genes, okay? So exercise turns on these 3 hormones, okay? Number 1, it will turn on PGC1 alpha. PGC1 alpha is a fat burning gene. What it does is it increases mitochondrial function and improves metabolism. You want to improve mitochondrial function, which I'll get into more, because your mitochondrial function as a menopausal woman greatly decreases. So because your mitochondrial function greatly decreases, you want this gene on. You want PGC1 alpha on, so you need to ensure that training and strength training and exercise is in place. Second hormone is irisin. Irisin is a hormone activated by exercise that helps convert white fat cells to brown fat cells, okay? So exactly what I said above, okay? We want more white fat cells, we want more brown fat cells, or potentially more white fat cells, that can maybe become brown fat cells. Now, there's actually more specific on this, and I'll just give you a little bit of just a side note here. Not all white fat cells can be turned into brown fat cells. It's actually the beige cells that can be turned into brown fat cells. But without confusing you, yes, there's beige cells too, but just know not all white fat cells can be converted to brown fat cells. But irisin is the hormone produced through exercise, that will help you convert more of these white fat cells to brown fat cells. And the last thing is AMPK. This particular hormone will help you boost energy, metabolism, and it promotes fat oxidation. So AMPK, this hormone, helps you burn more fat in your body, okay? You want these genes to work for you. Now, what will cause these genes or not to be expressed, or fat storage to start, or insulin resistance to start? One of the main things is sedentary lifestyle. If you don't move a lot, if you sit a lot, if you have a sitting job, if you just don't move a whole lot, this is one of the primary reasons you will store fat, because you are giving the signal to your body to increase that type of genetic expression. Another way of creating that fat storage expression is a chronic inflammation and metabolic slowdown. So if you have high inflammation in your system, you will also cause your body to slow down, okay? All right, so for the research study, you guys are ready for this? So one of the research studies they did, this was at Karolinska Institute in Sweden, okay? So they actually studied these individuals over 6 months' time, and they studied basically, like, they took fat biopsies off of these people from the beginning of the program till the end, and kind of intermittently throughout. And they actually studied, because they put them on the workout programs and different things like that. And what they found is that in total, they found that through exercise, it altered 7,000 genes that were reprogrammed, that influence metabolism and reduction of fat storage, okay? This is crazy. So the amount of genes that were altered in these people's bodies relating to increasing metabolism, reducing fat storage, better overall cellular renewal process, all of this stuff, 7,000 genes were altered because they exercised and strength trained and moved their bodies. Now, there were 26 participants in this, okay? So obviously not everyone's even, but if you kind of did an average, that meant that it altered about 304 genes per person. Isn't that crazy? I found that absolutely mind-blowing. Like, if you find that mind-blowing, I'm like, wow. So if you think of skipping the gym next time, don't skip the gym, okay? make sure you are exercising, make sure you are strength training, make sure you get some sort of movement in, because it greatly alters like hundreds of genetic coding in your body. Okay. Also, they found in the same study that when these people exercise, their genes linking to fat breakdown, so specifically lipolysis, they found that it greatly increased lipolysis in their body, and then all their mitochondrial functions improved. Okay. So that is why it's so crucial to exercise. And I will say too, like, just like I said above, if you haven't put MTP, like, I strongly encourage you to, because like, one thing I'll say to you is like, you are struggling with if you have belly fat, or you have altered hormones as you move into 40, 50, 60s, even 70s, and you don't know how to train or don't understand the variety of training you need. I mean, basically you're kind of playing with like this is just me, but it's my personality, is like, why are you doing something at 40% when you can do it at 90%? You might be going to the gym and doing a couple moves here or a couple exercises here, but why not learn actually the right protocol and get like 90 to 99% efficiency in your body by knowing how to train, by putting the right strength training, HIIT training, LIT training, which is low intensity interval training, cardio, the amount of cardio, or, like just like the different things that you need in your body. This is why, because there's so much research behind the reason why you have to train a certain way. So if you have not put MTP below, I strongly encourage you to put MTP. If you're not really understanding how to train yourself, it's not just walking, it's not just going to a group class and doing some group stuff. There is more to it, that if you really want a really great physique and you really want to pull that body into a really nice shape, I really strongly encourage you to put MTP below, okay? And of course, still with epigenetics, number 3 is stress. I talk about stress a lot. So they found that chronic stress triggers gene pathways that promote fat storage. So it will turn on genes that link to belly fat, and stress activates inflammatory gene pathways that slow metabolism down. And chronic stress switches off fat burning genes, making weight loss harder. Okay. So stress is a really difficult one. I know, Marcel, we talked about stress and controlling stress, because if that, like, sometimes you can control maybe the situations around you, but a lot of times you cannot control the situations around you. And when you cannot, you must control yourself and your mindset and the things you do. And this is why mindfulness, mindset work is so crucial, because if you don't control this, everything else kind of follows in sort of like fat storage, belly fat, inflammation in your body, all of that, right? Now, sleep also greatly affects your genetic coding. This is no surprise. So in a research study in 2018 by the University of Chicago, they examined how sleep deprivation affects gene expression related to weight gain. So what they found is that people who slept only 4 hours of sleep per night for 5 consecutive nights, they slowed down their metabolism by 15%. So if you tend not to sleep very well, or you get up all the time, that type of thing, then this is something you really want to work on, because your metabolism can be slowed down by 15% just by the lack of sleep, okay? Also, the lack of sleep will cause your ghrelin hunger hormone to increase and your leptin hormone to go down. Leptin is your satiety hormone, if I said that right. So it will cause you to have like kind of inaccurate signals where you feel hungry when really you're not hungry. Like, they're just called false signals, right? So sleep is really important. So try to get 7 to 9 hours, or, some people can do 6 hours, as long as you get enough of the cycle of the REM. Depends on how many cycles of REM you get. But in general, just try to get more sleep. And that could be Clarice speaking to herself as well. But, that is just the truth. I mean, the studies and research studies done on this is a lot, that you need good quality sleep if you want to activate fat burning genes, okay? before I move on, sleep itself is also a little bit complex because sleep is affected by your, like, for example, when your estrogen drops, you're going to be impacted by, not being able to sleep as well. If you have high inflammation in your system, you will not be able to sleep as well. If you have high cortisol in your system, you will not be able to sleep as well. So lack of sleep, not like just by choice, like maybe like Clarice, working a lot or something, but actually like you can't sleep is indicative of a lot of things in your body. So does anybody actually like lack sleep or just cannot sleep, put sleep below? Because that actually means there's things in your body we need to, look at and correct and all of that, right? And I also wanted to ask, how many of you struggle with cravings or sugar? Because cravings is another big indication of hormonal imbalance and altered ghrelin and leptin. Okay, altered ghrelin and leptin, those hunger hormones, will really impact you throughout the day, because then you're suddenly going to crave snacks or you're going to suddenly crave sugar. And so that's another thing that you want to really work on. And there's a lot of aspects to cravings, maybe like put it below if you want, because I did three lives, I think, on cravings. So it's impacted by a lot. Sleep is one of them. Inflammation is another one. Macros is another one that impacts cravings. So you could put cravings below if you want to learn more about that, okay? And then there's one gene that's called the FTO, which is called the fat mass and obesity associated gene, or there's quite a few of them genes. So some people actually do have an FTO gene, meaning like they're more likely to gain fat. And if you are one of those people, you probably know, because you're like, I just gain fat just by looking at food. I hear that all the time. I just look at a piece of cake and then I gain fat, So, or maybe your whole life where you see your parents or your relatives all gain fat easily. You might have the FTO, which is the fat mass and obesity associated gene. But in research, what they found is you can change that. If you have that specific gene, you can change that genetic predisposition by exercising. Okay, so no excuse. Even if you're predisposed, to gaining fat more easily, you can change the genetic coding by exercising properly, and obviously nutrition too. But that's what they found in like research with exercise and all of that. Okay, so like I said, that's all I'm going to cover for today for the epigenetic portion. But if you want to learn like more like really great detail on epigenetics, make sure you put podcast, because it's coming out tomorrow for that specific episode, okay? So put podcasts below. All right, now we're going to go into the third strategy for flatter stomach, okay? So now we're going to talk about mitochondria. So the mitochondria is actually the powerhouse of your fat metabolism. This is where fat oxidation happens, where fat is broken down into energy, okay? Now, I spoke about this earlier, but as we age, mitochondrial function declines, leading to slower metabolism. So why does mitochondrial function decline? This is because as you age, you actually have a reduced number of mitochondria, so fewer powerhouses to burn fat. You start to decrease in that. You start to have less efficient fat oxidation. Your body burns less fat for energy. You have more propensity to have what we call ROS, which is reactive oxygen species. So basically oxidative stress, to put it more simply, okay? But so when you are more prone to oxidative stress, it leads to more mitochondrial damage, further slowing down metabolism. So this is one of the reasons I speak a lot about like controlling your inflammation, right? When you're younger, I just know so many young people eat whatever they want, a piece of pizza, whatever they want, and they're just still so lean. They still look like bikini models at 20 years old. Sure, but you're not 20 years old, so you can't go on that. When you're no longer that young, your body is like struggling to try to control everything that's coming into its body, and you already don't have as much mitochondria. You already do not have the ability to oxidize fat as fast, and you do not have the ability to
counteract the free radicals and the ROSs that are coming into your body. This is why you have to be so diligent about inflammation markers. That's why I'm so strict about it. And and all my clients know that. And Dana, I want to give you a shout out. She's so good now. Dana, like her food, I was looking at it, it was perfect. I was like, she has no inflammation markers in her food, Dana. So yeah, from where you started, I'm so proud of you. But yeah, like, that's why I'm very strict about it, because that's the one thing you need to do to try to reduce that belly fat in your body, right? And then as well, you have lower ATP production. So as you age, you'll tend to have less energy for physical activity and metabolic processes. And so just like making sure like, you keep exercising to try to, because when you exercise, you help increase like ATP production, right? So everything your body naturally wants to do, you counteract it with like healthy eating, exercise, all of that, right? So this leads to fat accumulation, because obviously everything slows down in your body, right? And as there's more fat accumulation in your body, the problem is the fat accumulation doesn't just go all over your body, it doesn't just go to where you want, where it makes you look more like curvy and feminine. Unfortunately, in menopause, as you increase in fat storage, your fat storage goes right to your belly. Yes? How many people are like looking at them, are like, I know, you don't have to tell me. Because everything's slowed down, mitochondrial efficiency is down. All of this stuff is causing greater fat storage, but it will go right to your belly. So this is why you need to really learn specific strategies to control the fat storage, right? So let's talk about a couple strategies. And again, you're going to hear kind of overlaps of what I said before. So again, you need to exercise regularly. Again, you need to strength train, but you also need endurance training because it relates to mitochondrial biogenesis, okay, which is to create new mitochondria. This is why I said, as I go through this, you're going to start to hear like HIIT, you're going to start to hear strength training, start to hear endurance and all this type of stuff. And if you don't know how to program it, you're going to be confused. What are you going to do? Like, you're going to be like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, which one do I do? When do I do it? How much do I do? Because there's science supporting different types of exercises, right? That's why I said this. So, but you need strength training, you need endurance. I talked about this. You need cold exposure to help with mitochondrial production with brown fat cells. You need to ensure nutrients need to be properly there with proper nutrition, but also supplementation. So in supplementation, there's a lot, but some of the main ones I can say is kind of like vitamin D, magnesium. You need, like CoQ10 is an important one, usually for circulation, for your blood, for your heart. There's a few other ones as well, but if you want more specific, like supplementation kind of guide, it's better usually you talk one-on-one, because like when you talk generally, it's not the same for everybody, right? But yeah, there's certain ones I always agree with, like, generally speaking, I like vitamin D a lot, omegas a lot, I like CoQ10, I like those, omegas, things like that generally are really good for your body, okay? As well, you want to also have antioxidant-rich foods. Like, again, antioxidants control what? ROS, right? Oxidative stress. And when you think about oxidative stress, it's just like an apple. When you expose it to air and all of that, it turns brown, right? So you want to think about like your body is going to have a lot of oxidative stress. And how do you counteract oxidative stress? Think about for apples, I think you typically put some like lemon on it or something and it doesn't turn brown. So that's the same idea, as you want to kind of eat antioxidant foods to prevent that type of damage to your body. And again, things like berries or leafy greens and things like that will really, really help, right? The next strategy, so we're talking about strategies for flatter stomach. So number 4 here is improving metabolic flexibility, okay? So one of the things you want your body to do when it comes to metabolic flexibility is allowing or having your body switch easily between burning carbs and burning fat. The more metabolic flexibility you can have, the better your body functions. We can burn carbs one time, we can burn fat the other time. Usually when you're young, that naturally happens pretty rapidly, but as you get older, then it starts to struggle a little bit because of the fact that it can potentially, like, insulin resistance starts to increase. So it's having difficulty processing carbs. Or like I said above, it has difficulty with fat metabolism. So now your body has trouble metabolizing carbs and has trouble metabolizing fat. But one of the things is you want to work at gaining better flexibility, metabolic flexibility in burning carbs and fat, okay? So how do you do this? I know that's the next question people ask me. So there are different ways to actually achieve metabolic flexibility. One thing I'll say before I get into this is there is strategies to increase metabolic flexibility, but there are things to consider that you want to be careful of because of your situation of menopause. So that's why there's a lot of talk around intermittent fasting. So one of the things they said is, like, if you have a larger window of time between when you eat, when you don't eat, can potentially allow your body to use different sources of energy more easily. Now, I know there's a lot of extensive research with intermittent fasting. Like I said, there is benefits to fasting because it allows for more autophagy and more cellular renewal. But I will say, like, you have to consider a few things, okay? It's not really super appropriate for people who have high cortisol or who have very big hormonal imbalance, okay? If you have a lot of hormone imbalance, intermittent fasting can make things a lot worse. I had a live on this. I don't remember what it's called, but I did it where it was about, like, intermittent fasting versus eating multiple times through the day. And I talked about that specific situation. We could potentially tag you on that live. So the thing is, like, I would say, if you are metabolically healthy, like the ones who are watching, if you are like an Oshone or like me, or like someone who is very lean and fit, who has good metabolism, I think that it can be a really, really great tool, or even doing what we call like alternating kind of things, where you can eat frequently and then have some intermittent fasting. But I have just seen, in my experience of coaching a lot of menopausal women which have a lot of belly fat and which have a high level hormonal imbalance, it does not fare well with you. But it is part of the research, so I'm letting you guys know. If some of you who are watching who are a little bit more healthier on that side, it could do good to do a little bit of fasting, potentially. But if you're not sure, probably better to talk with me individually in Messenger or ask me a few questions so I can better guide you, okay? So that's number one. So number two is, in terms of metabolic flexibility, is to reduce processed carbs and sugar. This is not surprising, making sure that you actually be careful about processed, refined breads, pastries, sugary drinks, that type of thing. And then number three is making sure you prioritize good proteins, good fats. So notice 2 and 3 is carbs, protein, fats. So what do you notice? Is actually making sure you know your proper macros, right? When you have better protein and better fats in your body, you'll help stabilize your blood sugar better. And with healthy fats, it will create more fat burning potential in your body. So remember, it's about flexibility, metabolic flexibility of like going between like carbs and fat burning. So having proper macros is really crucial. Okay. So that's number 3. And number 4 of metabolic flexibility is, again, strength training and movement. If you exercise, you actually improve insulin sensitivity, which means your body is functioning better at processing the carbs, just like I said. And then there's another one that says, like, if you actually want more metabolic flexibility, occasionally it kind of goes back to that first point of intermittent fasting. You can do a little bit of like light exercise with like sometimes in a fasted state, but it's not recommended at high levels of intensity. So it's not really meant for example, the ones who do my workout programs that are in like the MTP protocols, that's, you need to eat. You're not going to be able to do my workouts otherwise. Like, trust me, you have to eat. You have to have the energy to produce the energy to make sure that you're actually doing my workouts fully. So you have to be cautious. That's why I said these recommendations are there, but you have to understand a little bit of it. Maybe you do a little bit of light exercise and, not eat for the light exercise you're doing, but then like you make sure you're eating for some of your heavier workouts, that type of thing. Okay. And then managing stress, sleeping well, like I talked about. Also with metabolic flexibility, you can work on carb cycling, actually like learning how to use carbs. So this is a little bit like where, you eat more carbs in certain days and less carbs in certain days, depending on your workouts and what you're doing. Now, metabolic flexibility or carb cycling, like this particular concept, what I will say is like it's good and it can probably be applied really good for people kind of further, maybe a little bit leaner and ready to get even more and more shredded. So for example, like I know one of the gals I used to coach, Rena, is going to go and compete. And so I can see that being used in competition. If you are just starting to learn about nutrition, like cycling your carbs is not always the best at the beginning because you have to learn how to eat macro balanced. So macro balance is more important to me because macro balance has to do with your hormone balance. So like, again, that's why I said like, when you hear recommendations by people, you always have to consider context. So yes, carb cycling I think can be helpful, but not for everyone, because if you don't actually know how to balance your macros right now, or you eat, let's say, really imbalanced. For example, some of my clients, they eat like really high fats, for some reason. Two of my clients tend to eat really high fats for some reason. And it's like, it's better to work on balancing macros first, and then you can later on work on carb cycling. Okay. So just some strategies to keep in mind. And that's what I would say, I think I did with Joanne McLaughlin. If she's on here, she's one of my longer term clients. She's been with me for a while, and then we moved more into carb cycling during her program. Okay. And then another way you can do metabolic flexibility is to make sure that you stay hydrated and have really good gut health. So really good gut health comes from, again, the foods you eat, having proper probiotics, electrolytes, things that support good gut health can improve metabolic flexibility. Okay, so that is number 4. Number 5 strategy, we're going to go into lipolysis, so the breakdown of fat cells. So you want to encourage lipolysis as much as possible, right? You want to, in order to burn fat, you need to have like kind of like lower, you have to like have more ability of insulin sensitivity, like to uptake sugar better into your body. And you need to have more like norepinephrine and things that like burn the fat. Okay. And that comes through things like, again, your cardio, your strength training, cold exposure, like I said above. And, I mentioned a lot of these things already, but just like things that help your fat burn fat better, like sleep, hydration, all of that. Okay. So you want to encourage fat lipolysis as much as possible. We're going to go to number 6 because there's a lot to cover. I have to hit 10 right now. So number 6 is gut microbiome. Okay. So gut microbiome specifically is you need to ensure that your gut has the right bacterial composition. Okay. Now this is massive. I did multiple lives on this in gut bacterial composition of your gut. So one of the key gut bacteria you need in your body is actually a very long name. I spoke about this. Is called Akkermansia muciniphila. Akkermansia muciniphila. This particular gut bacteria actually helps promote leanness, while other kinds of bacteria will promote obesity. So you want this particular bacteria. So this particular bacteria, I'll just call it Akkermansia, okay, for short. It lives in the mucus layer of your intestine, okay, and it helps maintain a healthy gut lining in your body. So it maintains healthy gut lining, it prevents inflammation, and prevents leaky gut syndrome. So like, it is really important to kind of feed that bacteria. So what feeds that bacteria is having, again, a lot of fiber, like I said, and polyphenols that support it, right? So making sure you have, again, those fiber things I talked about. And you want to make sure you have this good bacteria, because you want to ensure this bacteria is there to help you lower body fat, have better insulin sensitivity, and less inflammation. So this particular bacteria helps you with all of that, okay? It also helps you regulate glucose metabolism better and improves fat burning by increasing that kind of gut barrier strength. And so you want to have this healthier bacteria, okay? When you don't have the Akkermansia, specifically that bacteria, what happens when the levels are low? So when this specific bacteria is low, it leads to obesity, insulin resistance, metabolic inflexibility, like I talked about, and chronic inflammation, okay? So, and I know somebody would probably ask this. So you can get microbiome tested, just so you know. There are kits and things like that you can test this. So you can do that, or you can do it through symptoms, like how you're feeling. Typically, if you struggle with a lot of belly fat, high inflammation, digestive issues, you probably don't have great Akkermansia, okay? So how do you boost Akkermansia naturally? So we're coming back to similar things. You want to have more polyphenols. You want to increase prebiotic foods, things like asparagus, onions, garlic, leeks, that kind of thing. You want to ensure you have lots of omega-3s. You want to ensure you have fermented foods, but be careful about fermented foods, like I always say, because fermented foods, I'm not a big fan of like a crazy amount of dairy stuff in it. So just being careful about that. Reduce processed foods and sugar, because those will kill your Akkermansia. So again, when you are buying foods, I was just talking to one of my clients, like she's been with me for 8 weeks now, and she still buys some processed foods and packaged foods. You know who you are. And like one of the first things I said to her today was, the first ingredient on that label is cane sugar, right? Like that, like what is it going to do to your body? Like, I mean, yes, you can improve by changing this food in your body, but you're just putting more sugar back in your body, right? So being super careful about that, because that will kill off your Akkermansia. And of course, consider getting good probiotics. Now, if you watch a lot of my Gut Health Live, you'll know I talk a lot about good probiotics. You really need a good probiotic that has certain strains. Lactobacillus is a really important one, and obviously things that can support Akkermansia. And also, we always talk about this. I know Oshone spoke about it on last week's live. You want probiotics that actually get to your gut system alive, because if it doesn't have the right encapsulation or the right kind of technology behind it, your stomach will kill the probiotics before it gets to your gut system, to your colon. Remember, the probiotics need to work within your colon most, okay? Stomach, yes, a little bit, but it's mostly in your colon. So if it gets to your colon already like killed off, like you're taking probiotics, but it's not doing you any good. So make sure you have the right probiotics. And so if you want to understand or know the right probiotics, like I always say, put probiotics below, because I know the ones, all my ladies in the BioRevive system use the probiotic. I think generally I recommend, and they love it. I think, and Shenika's now in my transformation program from BioRevive, and Mimi as well. I think they all use that probiotic, and it's like helps their stomach so much. Let's move on to number 7 is inflammation and fat accumulation. So this is the 7th strategy for flattening your belly, okay? So chronic low-grade inflammation is linked to obesity, particularly belly fat. You know this if you followed me for a long time. So fat cells actually are inflammatory because they release inflammatory cytokines. So what I want you to think about is that fat cells, particularly belly fat, is not just a storage site. It's not just to store fat. They're metabolically active, and it produces chemicals and hormones into your system. Okay, and because they're active cells, active fat cells within your belly, it influences your metabolism, your appetite, and inflammation. And so it's really important to understand, like, why is it important to control and reduce belly fat? Okay. So when you have your fat cells start to expand, okay, like grow, so your fat cells will start to expand when it's like kind of in an obese state or in insulin resistant state. It will become stressed. Okay. So your fat cells are expanding and it will start to signal distress to your body. So as the fat cells increase, it will cause your immune system to start to like kick into high gear. And that's why it's called chronic low grade inflammation. So the body will see this as a problem and it will start to produce a lot of inflammation markers because you have belly fat. So what types of inflammatory molecules will it excrete? It will excrete these, well, I guess it's 3, but I'll call it 4 things. Okay. Number 1, it's going to excrete something called TNF alpha, tumor necrosis factor alpha. TNF alpha increases insulin resistance and interferes with glucose uptake. Oh, so that's not good, because if you have belly fat, now I see Marcel, I see Lorianne, I see Rhonda, I see Dana, this belly fat is increasing your insulin resistance. So before you ask me, do I have insulin resistance? Actually, the answer is yes. If you have belly fat, you have insulin resistance. Does that make sense? So you have already identified it, because by nature, belly fat is producing TNF alpha, which increases insulin resistance and starts to block your glucose uptake. Another inflammatory marker is interleukin 6. Interleukin 6 promotes inflammation and worsens your metabolic issues. Another inflammation marker is CRP, which is C-reactive protein. This is a marker of systemic inflammation linked to heart disease. Actually, and they will measure that in blood tests, typically, your CRP levels. I know Hope, who has a rare disease, she's being assessed all the time for her CRP levels. I think normal is around 10 to 12. She was at 60 something, but she did my program and we were able to drop it down to 25 or 24. Still high because she's actually sick, but like at least it was not at 60, right? So CRP is a really, it just indicates your system is under high levels of inflammation. So you can test that. And leptin is also like, it will be in excess. Okay. So like if you have belly fat, your leptin will be produced in excess. And normally leptin controls appetite, but too much of leptin will cause something called leptin resistance. Leptin resistance will mean that you do not have the right signal to indicate you're full, your resistance to it, because there's too much is happening in there. So that means you don't have quite the right hunger signals. Okay. So this is another thing that I want you to consider. Okay. So I have a lot of my clients who do not eat enough food. Okay. I have to tell you this. And I give you a certain amount because I'm trying to work with you, but you still don't hit the caloric amount. And I typically hear, I'm not hungry. This is a problem because you cannot trust your instincts because you have poor signaling in your body. And this is why one of the things I teach my clients is, no, I want you to still hit the calorie, right? Dana, like, yes, Sharon, like when I coached you, Marilyn, or Phyllis, when Oshone coached you, you need to try to hit that, because you cannot depend on your natural instincts to be like, oh, I'm hungry, I'm not hungry, when you may have poor signaling in your leptin, which is like, you may not even be leptin resistant yet, but you have poor signaling in your ghrelin and leptin because you have belly fat. So you're like, I'm not really hungry, and you eat extremely low calories, which is causing a major problem in your body. So this is why I kind of mention a lot to my clients to like, make sure you get the right caloric count and the right macro counts, and make sure you stick closely to it so that then I can like work with your healed body. Your body needs to heal. I need to heal the signals in it. And you have to understand, like, yes, to a certain extent, you want to still listen to your body, but when you are in menopause, a lot of your signals are not quite accurate. Does that make sense? It's already poor signaling. So that's why I specialize in coaching women at this age, because so much of your signals are wrong. They're not right, and we need to fix it. Okay. Another aspect here about the inflammation is how it impairs your metabolism. So when you have insulin resistance, it means it's going to be less responsive to uptaking sugar. When there's more sugar in your bloodstream, then your body goes into more cortisol, and then more cortisol means maybe not only more belly fat being deposited, but more hardening of the arteries. Okay, so like high sugar is not good in your system. And then hormonal disruption will happen. So it will affect your estrogen, your cortisol, and appetite regulating hormones, like I said. And with the more sugar in your body, poor uptake, then this will lead to diabetes, heart diseases, and metabolic syndrome. Okay. How do you reduce inflammation and improve metabolism? So there's a lot with reduction of inflammation, but I would say number one, you need to lose your belly fat. If you have high belly fat, you already have high inflammation. So you need to work at losing belly fat. You need to eat anti-inflammatory foods. Like I said, fatty fish, a lot of polyphenols, like that type of thing. Stick to like healthier oils, that type of stuff. Strength train, stay active, manage stress, sleep well, support gut health, take your probiotics, work to improve the gut microbiome situation in your body. So like I said, I could tell you what it is, but the system in place to make this happen still needs to be, there has to be a system to it, right? Of like, how do you then lose the fat? How do you eat throughout the day? So I always say like you need to have quality of food, quantity of food, timing of food to make things happen properly. So quality of food, quantity of food, and timing of food. All right, number 8 is talking about the role of insulin and belly fat storage, okay? So again, specifically insulin is the hormone that helps you store the sugar and bring the sugar into the cells. Insulin resistance means it stops responding to bringing the sugar properly into the cells, and this leads to excessive fat storage, especially around the abdomen. So insulin resistance, you really want to work at reducing it as much as you can. So things like, again, avoiding sugary foods, making sure that, again, you control your belly fat, making sure you move and exercise, having the MTP protocol I talked about, making sure that your sleep and circadian rhythm is working well. So making sure that you sleep regularly, regular patterns, and try to have a regular sleep schedule. If you don't have a regular sleep schedule, then your insulin sensitivity decreases. Okay. Making sure you have, again, any gut dysbiosis or gut imbalances. We want to balance that. You want to make sure you avoid as much chronic inflammation as possible. This means avoiding processed foods, toxins, and stress that disrupts insulin signaling. And you want to bring down as much fat cells inflammatory molecules, which was like interleukin 6, TNF alpha. So you want to control that. And you want to also make sure that your nutrient profiling is there. Like I said, you want to make sure magnesium, vitamin D's, omega-3s, chromium. Again, we can get into a lot. I'm trying not to go too detailed on that, but you want to have some of these things that can really support your insulin function. And yes, and so making sure the magnesium is a really big one that will help you with your glucose metabolism, okay? And you want to avoid as much environmental toxins as possible. So things like plastics, BPA, pesticides, pollutants, you want to avoid those as much as possible. So one of the things I always say is to control your insulin resistance is really crucial, because if you don't control it, it will become pre-diabetes or potential type 2 diabetes, right? And type 2 diabetes, then at that point, your body has stopped producing what it needs to, the insulin that it needs, right? So we want to not get there. Number 9 is circadian rhythms and metabolism. Okay, so we already talked about circadian rhythm like sleep, so I'm not going to go through that anymore. But the one thing I will talk about on this particular one is timing of food. Okay, now timing of food, I will say there's something I spoke about a long time ago. I still believe it, but there's more research behind what I want to explain here. In general, you getting the totality of calories and macros in a day is most important, versus like, okay, I have to specifically eat this and this at certain points of the day is less important. Okay, so the totality of what you get, like total calories, macros, is most important. However, in terms of circadian rhythm of like how you eat throughout the day and like how late you eat, some of that does matter because it affects your hormones. And one thing I'll say is like eating late. Okay, so if you eat late, try to eat and finish eating about 3 hours before you go to bed. That would be more ideal, so your body has time to digest, because your insulin response decreases at night. Okay, so if you tend to snack or eat things late at night, your insulin is decreasing in its response, so it's not helping you at all if you are snacking, suddenly running to the fridge at nighttime to get your ice cream. Okay, so you want to be careful about the late night snacking and try to cut off 3 hours before. And you want to, so this is if you eat late. But I was going to say, if you sleep really late, like I have some clients and I also sleep late, it's okay. Like if you sleep later, like 1 a.m. or something, you could still eat at 9, 10 p.m. at night. It's fine. It has to do with when you go to sleep or when your system starts to slow down. And I also get asked about what if I work out late, because I have a few clients of mine that work out late as well. And if you work out late, you can still eat. It is okay to eat, but it's just how you eat. So this is the part where how you combine your food, how you combine your macros really matter. Okay, so like how your macros come together impact things in your body. So when you eat late, you have to combine your macros a certain way. So the 10th strategy is to understand how to boost something called adiponectin. Adiponectin is actually produced by your fat cells, okay? But adiponectin is a specific type of hormone that's being produced, and it's actually a good kind of fat burning hormone, okay? Adiponectin actually enhances fat burning and improves insulin sensitivity. So basically, adiponectin, it increases a process which I spoke about above, AMPK, and it's an enzyme that actually causes your body to burn more fat instead of storing it. And when you have more adiponectin, it improves metabolic flexibility, like I talked about before, and allows your body to switch between carbs and fat more efficiently. And higher adiponectin actually improves more fat oxidation and reduces fat storage. It also helps you uptake glucose better, so you actually have better insulin sensitivity. It causes your liver to reduce its glucose production, so causing less glucose spikes. And as well, adiponectin actually blocks inflammatory markers like TNF and interleukin 6. So I spoke about these above. Adiponectin actually blocks these inflammatory markers, and it helps repair blood vessels and reduce oxidative stress. And higher amounts of adiponectin prevents fat buildup around the organs, and it prevents the fat cells from getting too large. Okay, so what can you do to lower adiponectin, you want higher adiponectin, but what causes adiponectin to kind of come down? So these are the things that causes adiponectin to be down, which is not good. We don't want adiponectin to be down, but these are the things that affect it, okay? So excess body fat causes adiponectin to not be produced because there's a metabolic pathway that interferes with it. So if you have a lot of body fat, you potentially don't have very good adiponectin. Insulin resistance and high blood sugar, so the ones who are pre-diabetic here, you will likely have lower adiponectin. Chronic inflammation, high stress causes lowered adiponectin. Lack of physical activity cause lower adiponectin. Poor sleep and circadian rhythm, like I spoke about above, in sleep and in the way you eat, can cause lowered adiponectin. And then, of course, higher processed foods like refined carbs, trans fat, sugar, those things all cause lower adiponectin. Okay, so we want better adiponectin in this case. And so if you want to learn how to actually like improve better body composition, put body composition below, because again, I can tell you all the categories of things you need to work on, but again, it starts getting so broad and confusing, right? Like there's so many things you have to work on that you're like, which one and where do I start and which one is most important? And that's kind of why I always say, like, again, there has to be a systemic approach to belly fat, because belly fat is a beast on its own. And it's not just like reduce calories. It's not just like don't eat fat. It's not just like I exercise more. I'm hoping that through this live, you actually understand, obviously I went into a lot of specific scientific research and details with you, but this is actually why you have to hit belly fat in multiple angles, because it is affecting so many things: exercise, hormones, gut microbiome, the way you eat, when you eat, how you sleep, how much you sleep, all this stuff. So, if you want better body composition, put body composition. And if you want to understand better structure system, which is the application process of everything I'm talking about, then put structured system below. So the last thing I'll say here before we end is, if you loved it, enjoyed it, or if you learned something new, like put what you love learning, because I hit a lot of aspects. All 10 strategies, just so you know, could be a live on its own, could be one live on its own. Like I could do one live on insulin. I could do one live on brown fat cells. I could do one live on gut health. But I put all 10 strategies in this one live for you, so all of you can understand the complexity of bringing down belly fat. Anybody who tells you it's easy to bring down belly fat is not telling you the truth, okay? Belly fat is extremely complicated. You need someone who really understands multiple angles of it to make something happen for it, okay? So hopefully you love this and you learned a lot, okay? Awesome. So hearts to you from Mexico. And as they say in Mexico, hasta luego. Okay, I will see all of you guys next week.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fierce and Fit Mentor podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit the follow button on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, or wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. If something in this episode resonated with you, please leave a review or share it with a friend who'd love it too. Your support means the world and helps us reach more amazing women like you. Until next time, stay fierce, stay fit, and let's keep building your most powerful self.